Hi, this is Jim Cranston from 7 Every Minute and 7everyminute.com, the podcast and website about reimagining your life. Thanks for joining me today to talk about, well, aging amazingly. So let's get going. If you like what you hear tonight, please tell your friends, leave a note, send me a message, and please subscribe. So tonight we're going to be talking about how many of us aren't just aging gracefully, but aging just amazingly, with lower rates of dementia, shorter recovery times, and doing well both mentally and physically much longer than used to be predicted. So what's going on with that? Well, this is from a story in the weekend review section of the Wall Street Journal on this past Saturday, Saturday, May 17th. Of course, as soon as I saw the headline, I thought I have to share this with people. And the headline is, there we are, Americans in their 80s and 90s are redefining old age. And they have, of course, the requisite picture of people just doing amazing things at amazing ages. But if you actually read the story, there's a lot of really interesting science that's going on behind it. We've been seeing hints of this kind of all around things in statistics for science, taking note that despite the general decline in the general population's health, it seems that many more baby boomers and older people, but baby boomers in particular, are living far longer than expected. Now, some of the underlying and obvious causes are, pretty predictable. Of the people they highlighted, pretty much all of them were staying physically active, trying to eat well. They're socially active. They had hobbies. They do volunteer work or jobs that required active participation. And very importantly, and this is really important, very importantly, they had good attitudes and focused on the positives, which helped when the occasional health calamity or whatever would pass through their lives. But it's worth noting that if you delve into that a little bit deeper, into these kind of superficial reasons, because when you do that, it seems like the result is a bit more than the sum of the individual parts. Also, as one of the researchers noted, older Americans tend to report higher levels of emotional well-being and lower levels of negative emotions. This surprised the researchers because, as one of them noted, they never really looked at the attitudes before. Now, there are some just fantastic statistics that came out of this. One of them I didn't realize, 1 in 6 people in the US are now 65 or older. So that's about 18% of the population. And it's expected that if nothing changes, by 2034, there'll be more people over 65 than young people under 18. So there's a lot of interesting implications with that, but it really means that people are tending to live longer. That will happen. That's how the curve will happen. Look like when that starts to happen, that people live longer, and the population, even if they're because the lifespan is getting longer. If you put a hard mark down like age 65, then there's just going to be more people in that cohort than there used to be. So, as expected, there's a number of chronic ailments and stuff that arise as people age, things like arthritis, diabetes, heart disease, things like that. But interestingly, even though some of the people in the interview, they had some of these conditions, they tended not to be that those conditions itself weren't the focus of their lives, and they were still generally pretty active. Plus, more people are becoming aware of how food has a big influence on your health and hence enjoyment of life. So they're really starting to adjust their diets. And of course, with all the GLP drugs, that has made a major change. That really has affected statistically a significant effect on people's eating habits. Things like a lot of the junk food companies are really trying to move into other areas and buy things like health food, interesting enough, or they're doing special GLP friendly diets and GLP friendly pre-made foods because people just aren't eating as much trash as they were before. And the article did note that the gap between lifespan, which is the number of years that you're alive, versus health span, the number of years that you've lived in good health. Right now in the US, it's about 12.4 years, and as they note, that's higher than most other countries. However, one has to be careful of aggregate statistics like this, because if a country has no or really poor health care, then lifespan and health span may be very close, but that's because most people pass away as soon as they get sick. So you got to be a little careful on statistics like that, because in some ways, and also how they define in good health, it may be even, depending how they define that, it might even be better if the health span is longer, because that may mean that you're actually living comfortably, even though they have something that they define as a chronic or poor health condition. Because if it doesn't impact your ability to enjoy life, then even though their statistic measure may say that you're out of good health, if you're still enjoying life, well, then I would say you still have a good positive lifespan. Also, somewhat surprisingly, many of the studies that have been done thus far, they focus solely on what I call, medical health, such as if you have high blood pressure, then, you know, they don't, they did nothing at all to try and quantify the people's quality of life. So there's been a lot of studies on health and a lot of studies. It's where all these Alzheimer predictions came from and all these great tsunami predictions and people going to need so much assistance and need more caregivers and things like that. But these were all based upon not asking the people how they were living. So judging from these raw results, you couldn't tell. One of the examples they gave was if the person was living in a nursing home or if they were the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. The only thing they knew was they were 68, had high blood pressure, and so that put them in this category of living in bad health. They knew nothing else about it. So those studies, for what we're trying to determine here, are pretty much useless. But the good news is they're doing a lot of new studies to actually fill in some of those things. And one of the things that they're finding, not surprising to us, of course, is that there's a lot of the outcome of people's attitude towards life and ability to live life happily at an older age is determined by that person's general life attitude. Where have we heard that before? How much attitude is important. It was pointed out in America that the concept of old wasn't even really formalized until the advent of Social Security in 1935, because that defined a retirement age. Prior to that, it wasn't that you were suddenly old. People got older and that was that. There was no line in the sand where you went from being young to being old. And this goes along with everything we've discussed on ageism and the hugely negative effects that ageism and negative feedback have based solely on our primary age. It's one of so many different criteria, and age itself really shouldn't have a major impact on both your self-attitude and what you're perceived by others. And as they talk in the article, yes, the basics are important. It's critical, I'd say, that you remain physically active. Depending upon your overall health, that can mean even simply just getting in some comfortable walking or doing some light exercise. There are some people that did moderate physical conditioning on a regular basis. And of course, we've talked about this before, the health benefits of being physically active. There's so many health benefits to it. Not only does your body love you for it, so does your emotions, your brain, and all those subtle little muscle memory things and subconscious tasks, such as maintaining your balance or, the ability to do light housework, even walking on uneven surfaces. All these things are much better if you stay a little bit active. So that's one of the core things that pretty much everybody in this article did. And then next one, of course, is super important, which is maintaining social relationships and avoiding isolation. This has a huge positive impact on people, especially when some of those interactions are in person. I can say, sometimes I have to go work in an office. And so I have a day full of Teams calls, but I'm locked in this little room in my office. And if I don't actually get out to meet some people, it feels like I might as well have spent the day alone. Computer-based interactive calls, yes, they're nice. There's a lot better than nothing. But if that's the only thing you have in your life, your brain isn't fooled. It knows that you're not actually talking to somebody and responding as you would in a real 3D world in real life. So interaction is super important with other people. Just hearing voices isn't the same as interfacing with them. And, it doesn't necessarily have to be frequent. And this is actually very important. It's great if it is frequent. That's even better. But if you know that like on Saturday you're going to the garden club, it kind of grounds your week and it gives you something to focus on and to look forward to. And it's having some regular, real interaction is a very big plus in helping you to age gracefully. And it's also really important to remember that one of your activities, that any of your activities really don't have to be age appropriate. One of the people they highlighted had a big 90th birthday party, and she had nearly 200 family and friends show up to celebrate. And boy, did she celebrate, amongst other things, by being part of this big commemorative line dance at 90 years old. So, it was pretty funny. They had another picture of the same woman. She and her son, he looks like he's in his 60s, just judging from the picture. And I just laughed because it's the same situation with my mother. I mentioned before, my brothers are quite a bit older than me, but my mother um, lived to quite an old age as well. And she used to laugh that her oldest son was on Social Security while she was still alive. So that family interaction, both these women, the woman in the article, my mother, they had the same sort of approach. They stayed active, they challenged themselves, they were involved with their family, they volunteered, they had friends, they had, they had trouble and medical issues, but they dealt with them and they tried not to let them make them the focus of their lives. And that's really important to keep a really positive attitude. And finally, this is an interesting thing. It seems that Alzheimer's disease is being less debilitating. Some think it's due to better control the high blood pressure because there's a big link between high blood pressure and getting dementia from Alzheimer's. There may be other reasons as well, but that a lot of the people in the study, they still, even though they've been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, they were still cognitively quite with it. It wasn't that they were getting dementia in a significant degree at all. So one of the things that helped with that, of course, is most of the people in the study were mentally active. So they're doing things like reading or learning a new language, studying, anything that really challenged your brain. So I guess the moral of the story is the next time you're tempted to say that, you're really feeling your age, be careful which older adult you're kind of using as a role model, because from these people that they highlighted in this article, on proactive aging, you might be, line dancing, getting a PhD, doing calisthenics, writing another new book, walking with a group of friends, volunteering, learning a new language, being in a Scrabble competition. I mean, all these people were doing things to stay involved in life. And the point is that even though aging has its challenges, and we've talked about that before, the biggest challenge is to try and avoid to view it as something which is entirely negative. There's many positives that come with aging. If you look for them, you'll find a lot of them. Many of the limitations are kind of reductions in the abilities we had when we were younger. Maybe you could walk 10 miles and now you can't. You can walk a mile or two. Or maybe you could lift 200 pounds and now you have trouble lifting 80 or whatever it is. Yes, it can be a challenge. Sometimes they're annoying. But there are also many positive attitude, knowledge, and perspective changes that accompany aging as well. And so it's never too late to start making positive changes in your own lifestyle. Something like, and there's some really extreme cases. If you want to stop smoking and eating Twinkies in your 60s, definitely go for it. You'll thank yourself in your 70s. Really, I've seen people make big changes like that, and it made a huge difference in their life and how they felt. If you want to learn Japanese, finally, after all these years, in an online group, there's really almost nothing stopping you if you can get access to a computer or a smartphone. Really, there are many more opportunities actually for lower cost activities as you age. And of course, people tend to be a little more accepting of diverse groups as you age. So, look for the good, keep track of your attitude, and try and keep it positive. And think about the opportunities that still lay before you. So that's it for the evening. Remember, I'll be hosting a free webinar called Smart Goals for Life. It'll be an interactive session. We'll expand on everything we discussed a couple weeks ago in the Smart Goals section, provide some practical worksheets and exercises to help you apply those concepts to your own goals. So whether you're considering retirement, changing careers, any other life transition, this webinar will give you the concrete tools you need to achieve your goals that really truly matter to you. We'll work through some real examples together and you leave with a personalized action plan that you've helped to create for meet your own needs. If there's anything in particular you want to cover, please drop me a note and we can certainly include it. So stay tuned for the specific dates and the links for the sign up. And as always, please remember, please register for that, even if you can't attend live, because there will be a replay and also you'll receive all the material that we go through in the session, and there will be a raffle of a new product. So all exciting stuff. As always, your homework for tonight is to think of some positive things you've been considering doing, but just haven't gotten to start doing yet. Think of anything. It could be something recent, something you've thought about your whole life, and try and come up with a list of at least 2 or 3 different things. And then extra points if you pick one idea and talk to a friend or even a stranger about how you're going to try and do something new, even at your age, no matter how old you are. So that's it again. Please remember the many wars and things going on in the world, just a lot of stuff here, elsewhere. UKR7.com, which is the link to the website webpage that has links to other sites that have support activities for Ukraine. As we know, the war in Ukraine just drags on and on and on. not a good situation. They can certainly use help from anybody. If that's not your main thing right now, World Central Kitchen, WCK.org. They work in disaster areas throughout the world. And anytime a disaster comes through, hurricanes, tornadoes, things like that, they're there. They help people. They get food to them, help set up basic necessities. So two great places you can help support. But there's lots of other places locally where no matter where you live, there's always people that can use help, either in the form of money or time. If you can volunteer, that's really appreciated. And if you can't do any of those things, remember, just smile at somebody. One of the best ways to care for yourself always is to care for others. And one of the easiest ways to do that is just smile at somebody, wish them a good day, just acknowledge that they exist. You could change somebody's day completely when you do something like that. I've seen it happen many times. So ukr7.com, wck.org, just help somebody locally, even just smiling at somebody. As always, thank you for stopping by. If you found something interesting and useful, please pass it along. Please subscribe and hit that like button. If not, please drop me a comment as to what else you'd like to hear. Have a great week. Remember to live the life that you dreamed of, because that's the path to true contentment. Love and encouragement to everyone. See you next week on 7 Every Minute and 7everyminute.com. Thank you.